it's all about.
Thank you so much. And the trouble is, do you think we communicate a lot?
So can you say that again?
Do you think society communicates a lot, or do we have lack of communication?
I think we have a lot of miscommunication. So, yes, we may be communicating a lot, or we may be trying to communicate a lot. We may be saying a lot. There's a lot of noise out there. The point is if whether our message is hitting home. So, if our message isn't hitting home with the person that we're communicating to, they're not going to understand us. And so, with regards to NLP, what it does, we all have our own preferred style of communication, and we tend to talk to other people in that style. If someone's got a different style, they ain't going to understand us. So a real good example of that as well is just a misunderstanding of like translation in words. Is actually the atomic bombs that were set off in Hiroshima. That was owing to a miscommunication, a misinterpretation of what the emperor had said, because he was waiting. He said, "We will await for further information." He didn't say we won't kind of like listen or talk to anybody. And President Truman, he heard that message and then thought he had to take it. He thought it was like he will not comply, and they actually set off the two bombs. That's an example of major miscommunication.
Yeah. And tell us about being a transformer coach, because you're a transformer coach too, aren't you?
So yeah, I'm a transformational coach, and essentially what I do is that people run patterns. We learn lots of patterns and habits, and we start to do them unconsciously. And a lot of time when people are trying to change their habits, they find it really difficult. Like people actually, people again, people end up in difficult relationships. They just repeat the same kind of relationships over and over again. People end up having the same problems, the same situations occur over and over again, and that's because they're running patterns. It's the only way they know how to do things. And what we do in neurolinguistic programming is we get into the unconscious mind and we work out the detail behind the detail. We work out how people do things in their heads. And we just use that. We just do it by a process of questioning, really paying attention to language, and that's body language and verbal language, tone of voice, etc., etc. And by doing that, what we can do with interesting questions, we can uncover the information that people themselves have lost and change the way that people do things in their head very quickly. And it's permanent change. It essentially means people have more choice, because a lot of time people think they have no choice in the way that they behave, and consciously no, they don't, because they just, all of the other stuff has just been hidden under repeating those patterns so often. And our mind loves to do things as fast as it can, so it can save energy and go off and do something else. So given the choice, it will just repeat that pattern. When we change that pattern, people transform, and that's exactly why I say it's a transformational process. It is like magic sometimes.
Yeah, yeah, of course it is. Yeah, yeah. Um, Also on here, I've been looking on your website also, and it says here 7 surefire ways to dissolve self doubt.
Yeah,
God, I get that all the time.
self-doubt.
Explain more.
So 7 surefire ways to dissolve self-doubt. It's really, we spend a lot of time second guessing ourselves and checking in if we're doing the right thing, we're saying the right thing, etc., etc. And that again, it's a pattern. It's a pattern we develop over time. So when we're young, quite often is we may have that. We have people telling us that we're no good at something. We have people putting us down. We may have teachers putting us down, or our parents, and then we start to and we may realize ourselves when we do something wrong. We start berating ourselves, and we start to internalize that opinion of others and sometimes of ourselves inside, and we then start to lose our self-confidence and start to doubt our decisions and doubt whether we're capable of doing this, that, and the other. And so, again, we're running that pattern so quickly, so fast, we don't even know when it actually just starts up, and that voice starts up in our mind, and then it goes off on its own thought spiral. It kind of takes on a life of its own. So, essentially, the first step with regard to that is just to slow down and get curious about that voice. It's not push it away, because if you do, it'll just keep coming back. If we try and put things underneath the carpet, our mind is going to keep representing it, because it's always looking for, it's always looking to resolve stuff. So essentially is to get aware, be aware of that voice, and then get curious about it. And one thing you could do is you go, oh yeah, how true is this? And then find evidence to the opposite of it. To the opposite, because there have been times in your life when that opposite is totally true. And it's always about finding that other evidence, because we tend to, in society, focus on the negative, but there are always positives. We have always, there's people in their lives who've overcome amazing, really, really great, big, challenging things, and everyone has. And by focusing on that, we can re-resource ourselves and kind of realize that actually that self-doubt isn't logical, it isn't true. And also another thing you can do is put a silly voice on it too. Is if you put it into a silly voice and kind of laugh at it, then you decrease it in your mind as well. So it's just a couple of things you can do.
Yeah. Thank you very much for that. And in the previous kind of like few years, you lost your brothers too, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. I lost both my brothers and my dad in the space of a year and a half.
Yeah, in three separate ways. How
Yeah.
did that? May I ask how that happened?
Oh, absolutely. It's absolutely fine. So I lost my little brother first. My little brother had bowel cancer, in part due to his lifestyle and his way of thinking, his mental state, the way his outlook on life. But he also was a massive party animal too, and he basically always thought the world was against him, etc., etc. So personally, I think a disease is quite often a manifestation of something else. It's our body is always trying to heal, and it keeps giving us messages. So anyway, he had bowel cancer, and he didn't go to hospital either, and he didn't pay any attention to what the doctors suggested. So it was pretty a pretty painful death, shall we say, because it was attached to his spinal cord, but I was with him towards the end, and so was my mum, and so it was really good to spend time with him. And then my other brother, a year and 3 months later, he was killed in a motorbike accident on the way to work, and so again that was a pretty traumatic time, because he had to go through all of that time at hospital. They do everything that they can to try and keep someone alive. They have to do all of the tests. So that was pretty hard on my mum, that, really losing both her sons in such a short space of time, and in strain. And then my dad died as well, and he died of cancer, and he never told me he had really bad lung cancer. So I didn't know. He hid it from me. So yeah, it was 3 months later he then died of cancer, and I think part of it was he just decided, my sons are dead, and there's necessarily no point in going on that. So yeah, it was a bit of a crazy time.
How did you deal with that? What's going on? Because you lost all your brothers, and then all of a sudden your dad went. God, I bet you went into that kind of like, despair of, in that kind of like, I say to people, they fall into a kind of like a pit, and they find it very difficult to get out of. What was that like?
So one of the things is I think grief really affects us in different ways. And me being who I was at the time, I've always been a bit of a crusader. I used to run, at that time I was running an adventure playground, so I was working with children who were very challenging in their own way, and I was on this mission. So in a way, I kind of just threw myself into work. And that's a lot of the things that I can just remember is doing the work. And I had this mission for making the playground the best place a real beacon of good practice. And in myself, I probably just suppressed everything that I tell people not to do nowadays. Is I suppressed all of that feeling. And I remember, though, sometimes being this detached observer and noticing that my friends would sometimes always make me join me up with other people who'd had people who died, as if we were kind of like, going to have a conversation, and it would be, and that was just not what I wanted. And what eventually happened was that I was in the playground and I was working under really, really difficult conditions. And one day this young woman came into the playground, and she, hurt people hurt people. They transfer their own stuff. So she came in, she started having a real go at me. And I basically just lost it. And I spoke to her in a way that I suddenly went, time to go, probably time, I can't cope with this anymore. And I've been
Mm.
sending myself into burnout. And so I just kind of like pulled back from everything and really thought, well, you need to deal with this. You need to kind of like take some time out and deal with the grief. And I did it in another way because I went abroad. And I just went off and I went traveling and I went and explored the world and kind
Yeah,
of.
and that's it, and that's it. See, and that's what I like about you because you went abroad, you started climbing mountains, didn't you?
Yeah, I did have a lot of adventures. And again, people could say, that that's about running away from things. But I also looked at it as a way of discovering who I was. And actually, my view on that was I thought, do you know what? I can either go into real despair, because what had happened just before, around the time my dad died, I remember that I had got out of bed and I couldn't, like, I was bent. I can't see with yeah, I was bent at 45 degrees and I couldn't straighten up. I just couldn't straighten up. And I looked and I thought, whoa, this is a physical manifestation of my state of mind. And I did, it did take, it was like after 2 days, I was all right again. But then that's me. Just carry on, which isn't necessarily the right way to deal with it. But I also, when I went abroad, I made that decision is that life is for living. So
Yeah.
what I was going to do is I was going to go and have a life and do the things that my older brother was a real explorer, and my little brother, because of his state of mind, he never did. And so I always thought about them being with me when I was traveling. It's like my dad was my
Mm.
kind of like guardian angel in some kind of in some way. And that really is my approach, is that I could have gone totally to hit the bottom. I could have done that. But actually, I decided that life is about not sweating the small stuff, because both my brothers had lost their lives. So what was the point of me going into, me kind of losing my life as well? So that generally is kind of what got me over it.
But also, what you've done is this is what I think what's really good is that you actually work with children on the streets in Colombia.
Yeah. It's
What was
just,
that
I
about?
think,
What?
yeah, it's just something that for me, I it's actually, I thank my mum for this. My mum's an incredibly optimistic person. So, you imagine she lost both of her sons. And it's about that ability to kind of to reframe things and look at things from a different perspective. So whilst traveling, I thought this is a real learning opportunity, because I'd worked with kids before, and I like to find out, I like to discover things that you wouldn't normally discover if you just go the normal path. And I decided to go into I asked around and I found this really dangerous place it's called La Olla. And it was a school for children who were either had no parents, who were living on the streets, and or children who were from very, very, they were living, it's La Olla means the saucepan, and basically it's kind of like the place where you don't, I had to be escorted in and out to the end of the road. You had people who were on the streets cooking up what they call basura, which was the cocaine which was left after they distilled cocaine. So it was a pretty challenging area, but the kids that I worked with were amazing.
Mm,
They
mm,
were so loving. It's just, wanting, looking for affection, because essentially that's what children want. They just want to be cared for, and they've had
yeah.
some, really tough lives. But what was also one other thing that I found very interesting was I was doing art activities with them, and the manual dexterity, because they'd never had the opportunity, their manual dexterity was really, really quite limited. They could all play football though.
Yeah, yeah. What I want to do is have you back sometime and talk about the kids in Colombia because that is something that is definitely on my art and because I do support things like that. Um,
Mhm.
the I want to talk about NLP training.
Hmm.
right? What's that all about? So people come to you and they
Hmm.
get, what kind of training do they get?
Oh, my light's just gone off. So the NLP training, neuro linguistic programming, essentially is a distillation of lots of psychology, but made very practical. So it's a set of tools and techniques, but a way of thinking that enables us to have more choice. So it can be used in business in terms of really identifying how teams can work effectively together, aligning values, hugely, more essentially emotional intelligence. It's also about developing emotional intelligence. But so leaders can then really connect with individuals within the organization, and it's develops. I don't know, how do I say, it's leadership becomes more charismatic. They're not leading from the front; they lead from within the team. Um, it's just a way of understanding how your mind works and how to make it work for you. Fundamentally, NLP was built on modeling. If we can model someone who does their job really well, who does something in life really well, um, and we can essentially take their values, their beliefs, the key aspects of what enables them to do what they do, we can essentially, NLP says, we install that in ourselves and we can do it ourselves. Of course, we need to do it at the unconscious level, because all behavior is at the unconscious level. I don't think about moving my muscles. I don't think about opening, my mouth to let the words come out. So essentially, it's really making the unconscious conscious. And it is, for coaches, it gets really deep, and leaders, it means we can really connect with people on a much deeper level. How do yeah, I just say it's an art and science of understanding what it is to be human, really.
Yeah, yeah,
It came from some really amazing therapists, modeling them. So, for example, one person was Milton Erickson, who is the world's foremost hypnotherapist, who could really, really use language to get results with people. Virginia Satir, who was an amazing family therapist, who got really specific with her language to get amazing results, dealing with conflict in families. And then another guy called Fritz Perls, who did something called Gestalt therapy, which is something around removing trauma in a very, very, in a way that people don't have to relive their trauma again. And so NLP just kind of like, it's always developing, it's always expanding and developing. But it's amazing in sports performance, because you do visual rehearsal, and it enables people to get over poor performance very quickly. It's amazing in therapy and in education. I do wish, NLP in schools, it would transform teaching, because children wouldn't feel excluded because their learning styles would be met.
yes, yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, Also, if people's listening now and they say, right, I need to get help or get support, and what can you offer them?
So for women, I'm currently offering, it's a membership program, which is £27 a month. So they can, it's around um, removing imposter syndrome and the sort of self-doubt and blocks, but also learning some of the NLP techniques along the way. And I also offer coaching programs, coaching sessions, generally from 6 to 12 sessions. I've never ever had to work with anyone for more than 12 sessions until they get where they want to get. But another thing is if, for example, people have phobias, get rid of a phobia in 2 hours. And that doesn't mean to say people have to go and face their phobia at all. We just do it in a very, very different way. So yeah, there's a huge variety of ways, but generally it's quite a brief program of work that I do with people. And then, sometimes I do also on the back of that, then I end up working with people as more in their business coaching and their ongoing development.
Right, okay. And next question is, some people will say, okay, you're doing this for women, but how about men?
Well, it just so happens, it's, yeah, I love working with guys, but it happens to be that currently most of my, oh, there goes my light again, most of my clients happen to be women. And the reason I set up that group is I could set up a group for guys, but there are some amazing male coaches out there as well, and they do what I do. And I think that I think because it's that identification, it's that they understand what it is to be male more than I understand what it is to be male. So I do think that there are spaces where it is better for men get better results working on their own together because they can be more open, and then women do as well. So hence just having the female that group for just women. But as I said, I on a one-to-one basis I work with men and women.
Yeah, yeah. I'm only, just saying because you probably get, we usually get inquiries come through and people say, yeah, but it's just for men, it's just for women, and
Hmm.
and also if how would people contact you if people need to contact you?
Best way to contact me is probably go on my website because there's a form on there. You can just send me a quick message. So that's www.abovebeyondcoaching.co.uk. I'm
Yeah,
also I'm also on Facebook. I'm on Instagram, but under my name. I'm also on LinkedIn. Just to find my name and search for me there.
lots of information, guys, on the website. Even there's blogs and free stuff and everything,
Yeah,
and everything about the clients that she's had, and it's really good. So I thank you very much for coming on. Thank you for your time.
you're very welcome. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for having me.
Thank you once again. Thank you.
Bye bye. Oh, okay. So